So I finished season 2. I want us to talk about it a little bit. Now what I'm going to do, first half of the video, I'm going to talk about the show in general, just why people have such a problem with it, where the controversy comes from, and whether season 2 addressed these issues that people had with it and made them better or actually made them worse. Now, second half of the video, I'm going to talk about specifics, different things that happened in that finale, and what I think the show was trying to get across. And I think it's going to be probably more controversial than season 1, if that's even possible. Now, what the big problems that people had with season 1, the main problem was how it portrayed suicide. Now, how the suicide sometimes came across was a couple things. It came across as somewhat of a revenge fantasy, and there was this idea that if you committed suicide, all the people that hurt you and bullied you and were kind of just shitty people, they would feel bad about your suicide. And that was the first thing people took issue with. They would say, look, the bullies and the people that hurt you, they're not going to be the ones that are even hurt by the suicide. Who's going to be hurt are the people that love you and the good people in the world. The people that are evil or apathetic, they're not going to care at all. So your suicide is not going to have the desired effect, if that's your desired effect, of making other people who you want to feel bad. Also, and this is where we start to get season 2, there was the sense that not only can you kill yourself and the people that hurt you, they're going to feel bad and feel the negative repercussions of it, you're going to kind of be around to see that and enjoy it. And here they actually brought Hannah back as a ghost almost, and not only was she back with flashbacks and with the recordings, which made her seem like she had this presence after her death, but no, she was actually back as a kind of Clay was hallucinating her. And it just gave again this sense that by killing yourself, not only are you going to be able to hurt those people that hurt you, but you're going to be able to kind of get enjoyment by seeing it and witnessing it, when most people would argue in reality that's not true. You'll be dead. Now, the second way the suicide was portrayed as a way to make the world a better place and a way to kind of teach these bad people a lesson. So maybe it's not about revenge, it's more about these people, they're going to see that their actions drove you to this. You're going to explain to them through recordings just why what they did was so wrong and hurt you so much, and then they're going to be better. Everything affects everything, so them being better, it's going to have a ripple effect. And there's this idea of suicide as kind of redemptive for the world in general. Now, again, a lot of people have issues with that. Third way, it was depicted as kind of rational, and it wasn't depicted as this kind of horrible decision that was very illogical and didn't make sense. No, it was depicted as, well, yeah, the world was pretty shitty. Everyone was shitty to Hannah, and her killing herself, it was, if not justified, at least understandable. And there was never the message that we always get that suicide, people say it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and they'd argue that at no time is this more true than in high school, because everything's so fluid, not to mention high school, middle school being, only a few years in the big scheme of things. They would say it's such a small period of time, and forget, college being different, the rest of your life being different, even another year of high school going from grade 9 to grade 10 can be such a major shift. So doing any kind of permanent thing in these years, most people would say that's bad thinking and faulty logic. But we never get that argument in 13 Reasons Why. We get, briefly they touch upon that maybe had Hannah been able to get help from Mr. Porter, things might have been different. But other than that, we get the messaging that it's not just that Hannah needed to change her thinking patterns and needed to see the world in a different way, needed to have a more positive outlook. No, the message is the world needs to be better. So the message is not that Hannah was just seeing the world through a negative lens and had just a very negative way of viewing the world. No, they would say Hannah was seeing the world as it actually is, which is a really bad, uncaring, awful place. And rather than us all just being more positive and just learning to think better, no, we actually need to work to make the world better. And a huge part of the theme seemed to be that it's not just a few bad apples. So the idea that, yeah, there's really, really bad people on the show that do horrible things, but the show never really seemed to single them out and try to say, put the blame all on them. The show seemed to be try to spread the blame around as much as possible to almost everyone was implicated to an extent. And you know, there's different perspectives on that. Some people would say you're really taking some of the blame. As soon as you put so much of the blame around on so many people, you inevitably take some of the blame off the real bad people that are actually perpetrating and doing these horrible things. So there's the idea that, yeah, it's good to say we all need to chip in, we all need to be better, don't be a bystander, everyone should, you know, if you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. But how far do you go blaming society and culture and bystanders before you start to take the blame a little bit off the real bad people that are actually doing these things? I don't know, it's an interesting question. And then season 1 got a lot of criticism for actually showing the act itself. Now, it gets a lot of flack, some justifiably so, for glamorizing suicide. And you think with the cassette tapes and stuff, like, it seemed very stylish, very indie. But when it came down to showing the act, I thought they did a decent job not glamorizing it or romanticizing it. There wasn't nice music playing and she just kind of drifted off. No, she seemed panicked and a lot of pain and just rapid breathing, and it seemed like a very unpleasant, horrible death. And then when her mom came in and saw her, I was just horrifying to, I think, instantly I cried. It was just very just tough to watch. So I thought when it came to actually portraying it, they did portray it, I think, accurately and in a good way, where it's not a peaceful way to go. It's very traumatizing and really a horrible death. Now, a lot of these criticisms people had of season 1, I think you could say the exact same thing about season 2, but one thing I think they did a lot better in season 2 was there was another criticism that Hannah in season 1, she was so perfect and so pure, and the show seemed to be saying that her purity made what happened to her kind of even more tragic. So when she hung out with Justin and they kissed, and then she gets slut-shamed after, the fact that that had been her first kiss and they hadn't really done anything else, it seemed to imply that that made what happened to her even more unfair. And you really should, a better message is that even if her and Justin had had sex, her getting photos spread around of her, it would have been just as sad regardless of how far they had gone, how much she had done with other guys. So season 2, she has a relationship with Zach, which I really liked. I'm a big fan of Zach. So her and Clay had some nice scenes in season 1, but I really liked her relationship with Zach. I thought it was really sweet. So seeing that, seeing her hanging out with Bryce, kind of, she had this kind of secret continuation of whatever she had, this flirtation with Justin. So seeing her bully other kids in the past and kind of feel regret about that, all these things just kind of removed her from this idealized pedestal that Clay probably put her on, and kind of brought her more down to know a real flawed, complex person. And her being a real person and having these flaws, it doesn't make anything that happened any less tragic. So I think that season 2 tried to do that a little more than season 1 did, and I think to an extent they were successful, and I thought that was good. Now, you can have some problems with how 13 Reasons Why handles suicide, but I think that its depiction of other issues like bullying, sexual violence, I think is a lot better, and surprising amount of complexity that is kind of brave when it tackles these issues. So, for instance, with the bullying in season 1, Tyler had a really interesting characterization where I think that a lot of people would look at his arc and have very different interpretations of him, how much of a villain he's supposed to be in season 1, or whether he's even a villain at all, because that scene we get where he's revealed to be Hannah's stalker, and she confronts him, and as she's going to leave, he asks her, would you like to go on a date sometime? And most people looking at that would say, God, he's so delusional. How can he think to ask someone out to hang out when he's just been revealed to be this invasive person who's making them feel unsafe? It's so comical, and you see Hannah laugh in his face. Now, from other perspectives, and from probably Tyler's somewhat warped perspective probably at that point, in his mind, he's just worked up the courage to finally get the bravery to ask his soulmate to hang out and spend time with him, and her response is to laugh in his face. And you totally understand that from that warped perspective, he could feel so hurt and so slighted and so mistreated that it's understandable for him to lash out if you're operating from that mindset. So I think it was interesting how you have a situation there where different people, depending on your personal experiences, you're probably going to see very different things. And then with Bryce and Justin and their relationship and kind of the loyalty Justin feels, I just thought it was just very interesting. And in season 2 we get that flashback of them as kids, and again you see how these bonds that hold people together and have people be loyal to one another even when probably you shouldn't be loyal to that person. You see how they're formed in such a raw way at an early age. And when Justin in season 1, he's talking about how Bryce, he didn't have shoes, his shoes were worn out, and Bryce, rather than buying him new shoes, he pretended that he had an extra pair. So not only did he give him shoes, but he tried to make him not feel bad about being a leech and a mooch. And you see how for Bryce it was probably calculated. Maybe he was just trying to get someone who'd be on his side and kind of owe him. But for Justin, it obviously meant a lot to him, and you can see how for him to break Bryce's hold on him was very tough for Justin to do, and eventually he was able to do it. But all these little things throughout their childhood just building up, you can see how Justin felt he had that debt, and just very interesting portrayal. I love that we got it fleshed out more in season 2. And Bryce himself, his characterization, so complex. We're 2 seasons in now, I still can't quite get a read on, just because he's the worst out of all the characters. Like Montgomery, talk about him, is getting up there, but I'd still say Bryce, the things he's done, maybe Montgomery's worse now, but I don't know, the things Bryce has done, worse than anyone else on the show. But you don't quite understand just what made him that way, why he does what he does. You get a sense that part of it is him just feeling he can get away, and he's probably maybe right about that, feeling he can get away with anything. He has so much money, his dad can get him out of anything, and he's very charming, he's very good at talking and manipulating and bullying people, so he probably has a sense that he can do anything. And I guess for some people, if they feel they can do anything, then they will do anything. And then there's his sense of loneliness and just typical feeling like he has parents who give him all this money and stuff that gives him this superiority complex, but also don't really seem to love him, so he gets this bad mix of loneliness and feeling entitled and superior to people. But it's hard to really tease out just quite what his characterization is, and even some stuff like, does he realize how much of a monster he is and he doesn't care? Does he, when he has these interactions with people, does he realize how much he's really hurting them? Because sometimes he'll interact with someone who he's traumatized so much, and he's so casual and nonchalant, and is this all just an act that he knows how much they hate him and how much he's bothering them by continuing to be nice to them and be around them? Or does he genuinely he thinks that what he does is not a big deal, and he genuinely, the BS that he spews with Clay, is that all just rationalizations that he just says to try to justify doing what he wants to do anyways? Or does he truly believe these things he believes about the world? It's just, again, and we're 2 seasons in, I still don't really know. And again, the show doesn't shy away from getting into the murky gray areas. So I loved in season 1, we see Clay where he feels so torn up about not staying with Hannah when she tells him to leave that one time, because he thinks, well, clearly she's upset, I should stay, I should comfort her. But if he says, well, she wants me to leave, but I know she really wants me to stay, and if he kind of overrides what she's telling him to do, which a lot of people would say, well, yeah, of course he should have done that. If he does that, how different is he than Bryce? Where Bryce said the exact same thing when Bryce was talking to Clay and saying, girls, they're conflicted, they don't know what they want, sometimes they say one thing, but they really mean the other. So it just shows that you gotta be careful, and Clay might have torn him up to leave, and he might feel like he should have stayed, and some people might look and say, no, he should have stayed. But it's a slippery slope, and it's different than Bryce, but how different is it really? Just like the fact that someone might not be a perfect victim, that doesn't make anything that happened to them any less serious or any less of a tragedy. Just because an issue might be really hard and murky and complex and difficult, that doesn't mean it's any less important to be 100% on the right side of that issue. So I do think there are issues that 13 Reasons Why tackles a little bit better than Suicide, but only because it tackles those issues so well. Like, season 1, the friend dynamic we see after Jessica gets raped, where she continues to try to hang out with Bryce, that scene of them holding the gun and her showing him how to shoot the gun, just so much tension with that. And then where she almost seems to be trying to egg Justin on to say that there's a problem first. Like, she can't bring herself to say it, but she seems to be trying to push things with Bryce just to force Justin to almost say it first, and then she can admit it. Just so much going on. And then this season, Bryce's interaction with his mom, like, just so chilling. So it handles these other issues so well. I wish maybe they would have listened to some of the criticism about how they portrayed Suicide a little more, because I feel like when Clay has that interaction with the principal, and it's so fascinating, the principal basically says all the criticisms of the show. He's the one who says, well, you know, she's dead, she's not really still living on with us, she's not a hero who has these life lessons to teach us and educate us about. He's kind of taking the position of the critic of the show, and he's one of the worst characters on the show. So clearly, by the show putting these arguments in his mouth and having Clay be opposite to him, kind of rebutting his arguments, I think the show really is kind of saying, yeah, we've listened to the criticism to an extent, but we're kind of going to keep doing exactly what we've been doing. But anyways, let's talk about the ending of season 2. Now, so what happens? First of all, I will say I really liked the note that Hannah's mom has, the 11 reasons, I guess, why not. Now, I like this because one of the biggest criticisms I think was fair of Hannah in season 1 was it did seem weird that she spent so much effort and time sending these messages to all these people that had hurt her or were somewhat only peripherally connected to her life, where her parents didn't really get anything, good or bad, just anything to give them a kind of sense of why it happened. So I thought that her mom could at least see something that had them listed as one of the reasons why she wouldn't have killed herself. It was a really nice touch. I also really liked Courtney, where now she's publicly come out and she's showing off her date for the dance to people. I thought it was great and good growth, because Courtney, she was so horrible in season 1 and did such awful things, but it seemed like she did that because she was just so insecure about her own sexuality, so scared of people finding stuff out about her, making fun of her. For her to seem to have a little more self-confidence, it seems like she had some growth, and some growth that would prevent her from doing horrible things and hurting people in the future, which was nice. And I contrast that to Marcus. I feel like I put him and Courtney in kind of the same boat, where they seemed like they were just very scared, frightened people that would basically do anything to save themselves. And Marcus, I loved how they explained how his aggressive behavior, it actually came from insecurity. People were making fun of him for not being sexually active. And it was interesting how they brought that up, how with guys are much more likely, rather than getting slut shamed, to get like, virgin shamed, whatever name you want to use for it. More guys would probably get made fun of for not doing stuff rather than doing too much. So guys are going to go the other way. They're going to actually probably lie and say they've done more than they have. So with Marcus, you see, it stems from this insecurity, and it was nice how, I guess, he turned on Bryce when he was giving that speech, but it really seemed like he was doing that just to kind of throw Bryce under the bus, try to save his own skin. I don't really think Marcus had a really positive arc in the season. I think Marcus is probably kind of where he was at the start. Now, how they ended things with Bryce, I like that a lot, because I was worried that they were going to wrap things up a little too nicely. Bryce's girlfriend was going to turn on him. He was going to get a really harsh sentence. The judge was going to set an example out of him, and that might have been nice and sweet, but it would have maybe rang a little hollow, because you know that usually real life isn't like that. So what we see is a win, but it's a very tainted, very small, very bittersweet win, where Justin takes the brunt of it. Bryce gets off with a slap on the wrist. And it was interesting, you hear Bryce's lawyer saying, oh, he's lost, all his scholarships. And if there's anyone in the world who doesn't need a scholarship, it's Bryce. He has parents who would pay for him to go anywhere. So the scholarships, it's just an ego thing. So it certainly isn't a huge win. It's a very small win, a little victory. But I guess the message that was nice was that Jessica, just by being able to stand up in court and say what she said, that seemed to have a positive effect on her and help her kind of try to pick up the pieces and move on a bit. So I guess the message would be that justice isn't guaranteed. So you always want to walk that line of, if you show Jessica coming forward or someone coming forward and then something good comes out of it, that might encourage other people to come forward, because they would look at it and say, well, if I come forward, then, you know, good is likely to come out of it. But is that giving people false hope? If you know that a lot of times people come forward and nothing comes out of it, it's the person doesn't really see real justice, and there's a sense of, well, what did I come forward for? So you do want to walk that line. So the line they took, where just coming forward and just being able to speak your truth, that can be good in and of itself, regardless of the actual legal consequences. I thought that was a nice message. And Bryce's girlfriend sticking with him, again, you don't like to see it, but that is believable, and it's not, you know, an unrealistic thing that would happen. And it'd be interesting to see where they go with that, and the pregnancy aspect, how much of that factored it in. I feel like they could have left out the pregnancy thing, and they could have just left that out, and it would have maybe had a stronger message. And then Justin being still addicted to heroin, I don't know how I feel about this, because he was away for a while at juvie, which, again, I'm not quite sure how much drug use there is at juvie, but I'd imagine he wasn't shooting up every day at juvie, so he would have been clean. And then he comes home, he's kind of a bit of a hero. Everyone's, if not congratulating him, at least have forgiven him for stepping up and doing what he did. So, and then he gets adopted, he has a place to stay. So it seems like, where was the motivation for him to start using again? But addiction's not rational, and it doesn't make sense. So maybe that was the whole point, that you know, he can have everything that he would want, a happy home, everyone forgiving him, and him being back in everyone's good graces, and yet he's still going to use just because it's got this hold on him. He can't help it. Jessica going and hooking up with him rather than Alex, again, it's similar. It's love, the heart wants what it wants, it's not rational. So maybe Justin's still kind of a mess, probably not a good choice for her to get involved with him for a variety of reasons. Alex is probably a much better choice, but nonetheless, she's gonna do it because that's just what she wants to happen. So maybe you'll look at that and say, it's not good for her, but they probably have good chemistry, and that's all it takes. So now the big cliffhanger ending. Tyler, first of all, what Monty did to him. I understand Monty doing that and having Monty be such a villain. To me, Monty, if you look at season 1, when I was ranking like who's the worst of the bunch, Monty was always right up there with me with Bryce. Now, what Bryce did in season 1 was much worse than anything Monty ever did, but Monty always seemed like more of a sadist and more of just someone who was always looking to pick on people and pick fights, and just a really bad guy. And Bryce definitely a bad guy as well, but it's just something about Monty. So when he did this, it was shocking, but I wasn't surprised it was Monty who they chose to make such a villain towards the end. And then Tyler, I don't know how I feel about what they did with him, because I feel like they drew this parallel between people who commit suicide and Hannah, and Tyler, and people who are school shooters, and I feel like there's definitely similarities, but it's a bit of a dangerous comparison to connect these two things too much. And I think that the show does this a lot. And I remember in season 1, Hannah was listing the people that hurt her, and she's like, Zach and Ryan, they broke my spirit. And then immediately she goes to Bryce, and she's like, you know, and then Bryce broke my soul. It's like, Bryce raped you, and Ryan, you know, he shared a poem, something you wrote without your consent, which is horrible. It's bad, but it's not rape. And Zach, he ripped up notes, like compliment notes, that's shitty. You shouldn't rip up someone's compliment notes, but to put those things so close to rape, and again, it goes to that whole message of the show that, everyone's complicit, everything affects everything. And it's like, yeah, to an extent, but you want to be careful about how much of an equivalence you draw between things that are so much worse than one another. And so with this kind of humanizing of school shooters a lot, like, I don't know, and I just feel like with school shooters, often it's like sustained bullying by almost everyone, and someone feeling very like they're unpopular and they just can't take being so unpopular and so hated by everyone. It's not so much just one specific event by one person or a group of people. So I just feel like what happened to Tyler was so awful, and if he wanted to get revenge on Monty in particular and really hurt him and really get his revenge, that's more understandable. The fact that he would jump from Monty doing such a horrible thing to him and then wanting to just gun down everybody, it was harder for me to make that connection. And I'd really liked Tyler's arc and Tyler's characterization kind of up to that last point where he decided to, again, just presumably start shooting random people, shooting everyone he could, because he seemed to be a little better adjusted this season. He seemed to have been making an effort to be nicer to people, to interact with people more. He seemed to have been doing pretty well. He came back, seemed like he had a really positive attitude. It seemed genuine that he wanted to be nice with people, make amends. So I get what happened to him was so horrible, but for that to trigger in someone who had been doing a lot better, just becoming a homicidal maniac, it was hard for me to get that. Had he been completely unbalanced and kind of slowly deteriorating from when he had been revealed to be a stalker and just had been getting worse and worse and worse, and then this happens to him and that's what sets him over the edge, I could understand that, but it seemed like he was doing progressively better. And up to that point, right at the end, I liked the humanizing of Tyler, and I liked how they played with that idea of, because he was already an outcast, already a loser, he was kind of a convenient scapegoat that everyone could band together and unite in their hate of. In season 1, they all did somewhat bad things. Some people did really horrible things, worse than what he did, and yet he was the one that everyone felt comfortable, Zach, everyone had felt comfortable just directing all their rage and hatred towards him, whereas someone like Bryce, who most people thought did something just as bad, if not, well, no, most people thought he did something much worse, but because Bryce had a lot more influence, a lot more power, people were a little more scared of Bryce, no one ever directed as much vitriol towards Bryce as they did to Tyler on a regular basis. So you could kind of understand where, yeah, what Tyler did was really bad, but the hate he received was to some extent disproportionate, and because again he was somewhat powerless, somewhat of a misfit, so he was this kind of weird mix of victim and perpetrator, which was interesting. So I felt that Tyler's jump from getting assaulted to wanting to kill everybody that he could, I didn't think that matched all the characterization work they did with him all season long. I also feel like Clay, his decision to tell everyone they can't call the police because that would be the end of Tyler's life, they've got to find a way to talk him down and kind of solve this issue themselves. I feel like that was supposed to be the end of Clay's arc of, well, he's going to do it right this time, and all the mistakes he's learned from his experience with Hannah, and now he's going to be able to help people in the way they actually want to be helped. But it just seemed like more kind of delusional Clay, like epitome of his kind of savior complex. And I thought he had such a good talk with Sky, where she's like, look, you're a good person and you could help people a lot. You've just got to realize that what you think is helping people isn't always what they actually need, and you've got to learn the right way to help people. And I feel like what he did at the end of the season, this was not the right way to help people, and in real life it would just end up getting people very badly hurt. So just I don't know, maybe people can comment and tell me why I'm wrong, but I thought it was a very weird, perplexing end to the season. And that brings me up to another thing I want to say. Sometimes the show does things that I just don't understand and I scratch my head at. So one big example was when Alex and Hannah and Jessica, they're having this little love triangle, and Jessica says to Alex, well, Alex was a guy, so he could never understand what Hannah felt as a girl when Alex chose Jessica over Hannah. And like, the experience of jealousy, and especially jealousy when you have a friend group and then two members of that friend group pair off and leave the other person feeling left out, that's such a universal, relatable human emotion. That's probably one of the most universal human emotions there is. So why they would say that a guy couldn't understand how Hannah would feel with Alex picking Jessica over her, it was just strange. Like, certainly guys and girls, they experience the world very differently, and there's some things that are going to hit girls a lot more, but if there's ever something that guys could relate to and understand, it would be that, and feeling rejected and feeling less than someone else. So the show does do things and say lines sometimes that I just don't understand, and I don't understand what the thought process behind it is. And then last things, I'll end with a couple other questions. If anyone can help me out with the timeline, so when Hannah and Zach had this summer romance, was that before or after Zach comforted her after she had that altercation with Marcus, and then tried to talk to her in the caf, and she yelled at him, and then he started ripping up her compliment notes? I'm unclear. Was that before or after they had the romance? It should be obvious, but I can't figure it out. And also, when Bryce groped her in the mini mart after that list came out, was that before or after she was hanging out with Bryce out at the bridge and in the clubhouse? I'm not sure of that either. And then a question from season 1 if anyone remembers, right before Hannah killed herself, she ran into that guy, that really nice guy from the poetry club, and he was really nice to her, and she's kind of polite back. I was just curious if anyone had any kind of interpretation of why you think they chose to include that and what they're trying to get across there, because it was very interesting and stuck out in my mind, but I've never quite understood what they were trying to communicate. So if anyone can comment either of those things, if anyone has made it to this point in the video, I've kind of gone on a lot. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I hope to hear your thoughts on those questions, or anything else you want to comment in the comments.